it actually happened. I still can't believe it, but it actually happened. Geno is back. Super Mario RPG is getting a remake. I have no words. I have no words. I am still in shock from all of this. I can't believe it. Geno is back. Super Mario RPG is getting a remake. It is incredible. I literally just have not been able to fathom that this actually happened. I am so happy. I am beyond happy. It's just crazy to me. Even days later, it hasn't settled yet. This is amazing. Thank you, Nintendo, for hearing our voices on this one. And to every Mario RPG and Geno fan out there, congratulations, everybody. Congratulations to all of us. We did it. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the entire fan base out there. I think the whole fan base had a hand in this one becoming a reality. Without the Geno for Smash movement, or all the fans out there who have been pushing for Geno and Malo to return, or pushing for Nintendo to revisit the Mario RPG universe in some way, all the artists out there, all the groups and forums and stuff out there, all the people who held together asking for this never would have happened. So really, truly, everybody out there who's been a part of all this over all these years, congratulate yourselves on a job well done. For sticking it out through some really hopeless feeling times for the series and for these characters, and coming out on the other side finally with a win. I thank you, and I want to thank everybody out there for making this happen. Alright, well, I could make a whole victory lap video where I just repeat how ecstatic I am about this and how great it is for all us Geno fans, Mario RPG fans, but I'm sure you are all very aware of how happy I obviously am about this one already. And now there are things to talk about. We have a game to speculate about for the next couple months, and a potential future for this game series and these characters, so let's not waste any more time and dive right in. So in the lead up to this past week's Nintendo Direct, Pyoro over on Twitter had correctly predicted the Direct happening that week. They had also predicted a 2D Mario game would get announced, and a classic SNES game was getting a remaster. They posted this Fat Baby Yoshi image suggesting the game could be Mario RPG. And now we know, on both fronts, they were totally right about those, of course. I had heard rumors myself, specifically hearing a week earlier a Mario RPG remake was actually happening, and would be announced before the end of the month, and a few tidbits of rumored info I had heard about the 2D Mario game. Well, my predictions actually came true as well on that one. The important one being Mario RPG did in fact get a remake announced. So for today, let's do a deep dive analysis into the new Super Mario RPG remake, everything we know about it so far. First, I'll do like a quick recap breakdown of what we saw in the trailer, but I won't go frame by frame and into a ton of detail. There is a lot of interesting little things there that I do want to point out and speculate about, but we can go back and dissect all that info separately afterwards, periodically returning to the trailer when need be. But let's just rewatch it, and I'll point out the main takeaways from our reveal trailer, before getting into the nitty-gritty details afterwards. Okay, so right away, can we acknowledge that the trailer begins with the old Mario RPG opening scene, and then what I think is supposed to be Geno's Star Spirit coming down from Star Road and granting our wish of getting a new Super Mario RPG. I think a lot of people overlooked that. This was most likely Geno's star form at the beginning, and if you know Mario RPG, Geno is actually a star being inhabiting a doll, and his mission is to restore Star Road so everyone's wishes can once again be granted and come true. So this game reveal was all framed as Geno hearing our wishes and granting them with a new game. Very cool way to reveal the remake. Alright, so after the upgraded intro Peach and the Flowers moment, we get our first look at this game's little chibi small Mario, and a brief glimpse inside his house. And then we get the title reveal for Super Mario RPG, as he chases after Bowser and the kidnapped Princess Peach in Bowser's Koopa Clown car. Then we are treated to a bunch of shots of Mario walking around the game world with updated areas and enemies, looking very close to the original game. Almost one-to-one, just now it's presented to us in modern graphics and this new art style, which I think captures the look of the original really well. Next, we get Malo and Geno revealed. Along with revealing, this game appears to have fully rendered cutscenes, which I am super excited about. Then we get a look at the combat for this game. While generally looking like the classic Mario RPG combat, some things do look quite different here, and we'll go over that a bit later. We get some bosses revealed. Once again, looks like cutscenes will be a big part of this remake, and then a bunch of quick shots of some of the in-game boss fights playing out. This is followed up by some more cutscenes. These ones in particular are very intriguing as they show what appears to be our heroes performing attacks. We'll talk more about that a little later too. This leads into a bunch of shots of the game world, revealing some interesting side characters and locations. Very happy to see it all looks basically just like it did on the Super Nintendo, only updated. Finally, we get a great shot of the whole team, and then the release date, November 17th, which is 2 days before my birthday. I don't think I could have asked for a better birthday gift. Alright, so let's go back over all of that in detail. You'll notice for this remake, there's no subtitle Legend of the Seven Stars here. That was only present in the Western release of the original game. At first I was thinking maybe they did this to differentiate the remake from the original, but most likely this was done to standardize the game across all translations. Nintendo's made a push to keep things more universally consistent in recent years. So using the more common and shorthand Super Mario RPG, which was also just the Japanese title anyway, makes a lot of sense. We've now seen the box art for the game, and it looks like this with a plain white background, which is fairly consistent with the Japanese Super Famicom box art of the original game. Personally, while I like the Western box art with XOR and Bowser's Keep and everything, and it would have been cool to get an updated cover that looked like that, I'm happy this time we'll at least have the full party, including Geno, on the box art. And I honestly think the plain white backdrop will help make this game really stand out and pop on store shelves next to other game boxes. And this isn't a complete one-to-one recreation of the Japanese box art either. Geno and Peach have switched positions, and Geno and Mallow are now more at the front this time. Cool change, as I think a big selling point here will be fans of those two characters, and new players who might be intrigued to pick up the game, interested in learning who these two lesser-known Mario characters actually are. Also, Yoshi is no longer on this version of the cover art, like he was in the original Japanese box. Yoshi, of course, hasn't been cut from the game or anything. We've seen him already in the footage we got in the trailer, but Yoshi was someone you could summon for an attack using an item in the original game. I suspect that's the same this time around too. You'll probably be able to summon Yoshi with the Yoshi cookies. So having him on the cover of the original was a bit misleading. It made it seem like he was another main party member when he was really just someone you could summon. Not to worry though, Yoshi fans still eating good. Yoshi appears to be a playable character in Super Mario Wonder. Alright, well let's talk a bit about these updated designs for our main characters. Like I mentioned before, we got a small Mario and small Peach here. I have to say, I really dig it. Great reiteration of the original look of the game. To make them kind of chibi style like that, it fits. Bowser here is probably the only one I have an issue with. He looks fine, I just think he looks very similar to how he always looks these days, which is a little jarring next to the much more specific Mario and Peach redesigns we got. And I don't think he really captures exactly how he looked in the original Mario RPG. Like, again, it's fine, he looks fine. It isn't that jarring that he mostly just looks like modern Bowser, but I felt it worth mentioning as I did notice that he stands out a bit among the others. And then finally, Geno and Mallow updated after all this time. Their official renders look incredible. I couldn't be happier here with how these two look. Mallow looks totally squishy and stretchy in 3D, getting a cutesy Kirby vibe big time from him, and I love how big they made his hands, something I always liked about him in his original design. They made his eyes and mouth smaller while making him overall wider. But again, I think this adds to how squishy he looks, and his belt buckle is smaller now too. He's still got his Black Mage style pants, the molding of Mario and Final Fantasy come to fruition in Mallow. I'm glad the overall texture isn't as lumpy as it was before for him too. Modern graphics were able to smooth him out, which I think looks a lot better. Again, more cutesy, a lot more squishier. He reminds me a lot of Kirby here, and I really like it. And then there's Geno's new design. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. The wood grain texture and coloring that they went with looks great. I love the different shades between his shoes and his body there. They slightly changed his chest proportions and the size of his arms and legs, which I think looks a lot better than before. And the detail in his clothing is fantastic. The gold rings and twisted rope holding his cape on. There's just so much detail here now. And the fact we can see the stitching in his hat helps convey that toy doll concept he's going for. They went with a light blue coloring, whereas the original artwork for Geno had him wearing dark blue. But the light blue is actually much more consistent with his in-game sprite from the original game, and frankly, I prefer it. His face looks much better in this render too. His nose is more clearly his nose, and his ventriloquist dummy mouth looks thinner than the lines under his eyes, which helps differentiate it as his mouth, which helps his face read as it should. His eye color is now more of a dark brown than a red, but it's consistent with how the old design had the eyes the same color as his shoes. Before it was sort of an earthen clay red, now they're a matching dark brown. Also much easier to read that the wood curls coming out of his hat are supposed to be his hair. I gotta take a moment also to say I am happy how expressive they both are. Love that they show Geno isn't some stone-faced stoic guy. A lot of people characterize him that way, and it was never really accurate to the game where he laughs and reacts to things all the time. Anyway, they are both oozing with personality from what we've seen. Again, something that sprites had in the original, but we had almost no official renders or artwork for. Like, I don't think I can harp on that point enough. I am a huge fan of this character, and for the past 27 years, This was basically the only official image of him we had. 27 years. Other than that image, all we really had was his sprite work, this image from a Japanese guidebook, this official artwork from a Japanese puzzle, some semi-official, completely off-model Mario-kun comic pages, his brief sprite cameo in Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga, which, by the way, got cut from the remake of the game, so we didn't even get an updated version of that, and then the Mii outfit from Super Smash Bros. For a beloved character with so much fan artwork out there, we have been living off of scraps for decades. Glad to have you back, Geno. Love the way you look. While we aren't 100% sure who exactly is making the remake, like who the head developers are, the end screen of the trailer lists both Nintendo and Square. So whether Square themselves are making it, or if Nintendo is just partnering up with them for the rights to use the characters and stuff, we simply don't know yet. But it's very nice to see Nintendo and Square are on such friendly terms these days, and this game's getting made. There was a point in time where these two companies coming back together seemed absolutely impossible. Getting a revived Mario RPG, never gonna happen. Also, happy to report Yoko Shimomura is once again in charge of the music. To this day, the Mario RPG OST is one of the best game soundtracks out there. It still holds up. I can't tell you how many times people have asked about the Forest Maze jingle at the beginning of my videos. The songs are just that good. Honestly, I could see the soundtrack winning like a game award this time around. Would not surprise me in the least if this game ends up having the best music of any game this year. Unfortunately, the original game director, Chihiro Fujioka, does not appear to be involved with the remake, though he gave it his blessings and seems very happy it's happening. We had seen a lot of the original game concept art popping up online over the past few years, so very possible that was happening because some of the original team might be looking through old files in order to recreate the game. Unconfirmed, but it would make a lot of sense since all this concept art has been popping up over the last few years. For example, in this Booster's Tower scene from the trailer, we can see the toy box in the corner. In the original game, I thought it was just the Peach doll and then a random mess of pixels representing random toys. But in the remake, they updated it, and we can tell what these actually are supposed to be. I didn't even catch the Samus figure, which is now pretty obvious in the original after knowing it's Samus. But there's also Disc-kun and a car from Stunt Racer FX, and Peach is on top of Rob. Particularly the Disc-kun and Stunt Racer FX cameos here, as far as I'm aware, have gone totally unnoticed for years. At least I never noticed them. And I don't think some random person tasked with updating the game would have caught that just looking at the sprite work. More than likely, they are looking at the old concept and art designs from the game. And now that we've seen these cameos, I also expect the other more memorable cameos that everybody knows about from the original will show up in the remake as well, like Sleeping Link and Sleeping Samus. And while we're on the subject of the look of the game, I gotta mention the whole Mario Mandate thing. So for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, the Mario Mandate is a sort of fan theory about the homogenized and standardization of the Mario series that we saw for several years, causing many fans to claim the series was becoming really stale and kind of bland. Think the new Super Mario Bros. Series. Good games, but very similar in art design, and very much so the standard look that we've come to expect from the Mario series. This somewhat makes sense from a brand recognition and marketing point of view. No matter what iteration of a Mario game a kid is familiar with, they'll recognize the standard Mario characters and enemies in all other media across all the boards. So wanting to keep as many Mario games as possible with the standard Mario look can, again, make sense from a marketing and brand recognition point of view, but not so much from an artistic point of view or a fan point of view. But this was just a fan theory that they were standardizing everything and that this was being pushed. And there's no proof that keeping all the Mario enemies and character designs very samey and standardized was a hard rule internally at Nintendo. We don't know that for sure. There's just a lot of circumstantial evidence pointing to that at least being the direction they were often going with for the series for a long time. And it's something many fans picked up on that had been happening to the once vibrant and often experimental Mario series, especially when remakes would come out and the enemies would have redesigns closer to the standard look of the enemies rather than the original art style of the game that was being remade. This was particularly noticeable in the Mario RPG games, such as the Mario & Luigi series and the Paper Mario games. Especially with the Toads in the Paper Mario games, it became more and more samey to the point where we don't even see Toadsworth or anything like that anymore. Now, I will say in more recent years, this seems to have been loosened up on a bit more than it was. For example, Mario Odyssey doesn't have that issue at all whatsoever. But again, it really did seem like the Mario RPG, the Mario role-playing games, were hit really hard with this supposed Mario mandate. And there was, of course, always a fear that if modern Nintendo did revisit Mario RPG, a game with lots of unique designs, many of them would be replaced with more standard versions of those characters. So I'm very happy to report that is not the case at all from what we've seen. Unique Toads, unique enemies, even the chained Kong, we got it all here. Could not be more pleased with how this game looks. In fact, seeing Mario RPG look this way, just like it did before, and Super Mario Wonder with its new art style, fans seem to be celebrating if there ever was a Mario mandate or anything even close to suggesting things in that direction. This past direct has it dead and buried. Now that of course doesn't mean they won't be cutting anything from this remake. Mario RPG came out in the 90s when video games, even ones for kids, could get away with a lot of risky subject matter. For example, some things we could see cut from the game, or at least changed, could be stuff like Frogfucius. He might be seen as an Asian stereotype. He's a wide, old, Confucius-like character, so that could cause issues. There's a casino in the game. A lot of times, anything with gambling ends up censored in some areas of the world. There's a moment where Mario almost punches a little kid, Gaz, who owns the Geno doll. Bowser, Mario, and Booster all kiss during a certain cutscene. I'm honestly bracing for people online claiming they added woke stuff because of this scene. And there's also some dialogue and text that could get censored or at least changed. Here's a line referencing Bruce Lee. I doubt that's a direct translation of the Japanese version of the game, so some things may be changed just to make the game more the same across the board translation-wise. Somewhat of a shame because the original dialogue is really strange at times, and honestly it added a lot of charm to the game. The game was translated by Ted Woolsey, who famously made some odd translation choices, like Exor's mouth being called Neo Squid, but again, they really do add to the comedy and charm of the game. For example, Mallow, having the psychic ability to read enemies' minds, was called Psychopath. Actually excited to see if they update all the lines of thought you get by reading enemies' minds with that move. We do know of at least one part of the game's translation that has been changed this time. Toadstool is now called Peach. This was likely done both to modernize and standardize her name across all regions, which of course has been going on for a long time already, so it's not unexpected here that they don't call her Toadstool. The kanji in the Japanese version still calls Bowser Koopa, so that's not standardized across all regions, but they've been calling Bowser Koopa in Japan and Bowser in America for a long, long time. I don't expect that to change with this game. There are some other things that could change, though. There's actually some sexual innuendo stuff in the game, which could get censored or changed. In the princess's bedroom, you can find Toadstool's question mark, which was called Peach's XXX in the Japanese translation. You never find out what this is exactly, but it's something private she'd rather not have anyone find in her room. I always assumed, even as a kid, it was some kind of like sex toy or pornography, honestly. As strange as that is in a Nintendo game, that really seemed to be what they were implying. One of the bosses, Valentina, had her breast jiggle after you hit her with an attack. From what we saw, that seems to have been removed from this version of the game. However, apparently her name in Japanese is Margarita, and they updated her drink to actually resemble correctly the alcoholic margarita drink. So, I don't know, tough call how censored this game is going to be in the end, as we have an alcoholic beverage here. Speaking of Valentina, we found out from one of the main enemy designers on Twitter that the bird on her head is, in fact, a reference to Squawks from the Donkey Kong Country game. So the Kongs in chains aren't the only Donkey Kong Country references here. Both games had a similar graphical look on the Super NES, and you can really tell Mario RPG was heavily influenced art style-wise by Donkey Kong Country. Valentina's breast jiggling isn't the only thing we know has been removed from the game either. Mario now takes his hat off instead of flashing a peace sign when he saves Geno from Boyer. Most likely, Mario will do this instead of flashing a peace sign as his victory animation now too. Not all that surprised, as Miyamoto is on record saying he stopped Mario doing the peace sign all the time as he thought it was too childish. Mario used to do the peace sign or the V victory sign all the time in his early days. Miyamoto finding it too childish might not culturally translate well, but a lot of Japanese cartoon characters and stuff flash the peace sign symbol all the time. So I can understand him wanting Mario to differentiate himself from being just another very typical Japanese peace sign flashing kid's mascot. Probably in an attempt to make Mario appeal to a wide audience age-wise and not be seen as a kiddie character. Mario has done the peace sign occasionally, more recently though, such as in Mario Odyssey, but that seems to possibly be a reference to Mario 64, or simply rock, paper, scissors in general. This wouldn't be the first time a character's victory animation has been changed in Mario RPG either. Bowser originally had an arm gesture that's considered offensive in some regions of the world. This was changed for the Western release, and I assume that'll be the case again this time. Mario, Mallow, and Peach all flash the peace sign for their victory poses. So Mario taking his hat off instead honestly gives him a bit more of a unique personality and unique victory animation here. It's a unique pose for him. I honestly wonder if Peach and Mallow will both keep their peace sign victory poses. I could see maybe Mallow keeping his, and maybe Peach will just twirl and wink instead. Remains to be seen, but I could see them only having one character that does the peace sign, just to have them all be unique and different. I mean, lots of stuff remains to be seen about this game. Particularly excited to see more characters and boss designs, like Jonathan Jones, Jinx, the Axum Rangers, Culex. Kinda hoping Culex remains a 2D sprite, but we'll have to see what they decide to do with that one. I really dig what we've seen so far with characters like Croco and Boshi. Boshi now has these red ankle bracelets rather than his toes ripping through his shoes. Also, I should mention, Mega Smilax was name-dropped during Piranha Plant's Palutena's guidance in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, so I wonder if even back then Nintendo and Square were cooking this game up already. Anyway, talking about boss fights, let's talk about one of the most noticeable changes we can see from the trailer: the UI, or user interface. Essentially, the menus we see during combat. While most of what we've seen with this game I could not be happier with, probably my least favorite update is the UI. Just looks very standard and bland in my opinion. Not that the original game was anything amazing UI-wise, but this just looks incredibly typical like any other RPG's UI. However, I will say function over form for these kinds of things. There may be some quality of life improvements happening here that I'm not noticing having the UI this way. One quality of life improvement you can see though is that the number of flower points are going to be visible at all times, and that will be useful. They avoided showing characters choosing attacks in the trailer though, but I really hope they keep the button cross thing in front of the characters' faces like the original game. Though I'm not too hopeful of that since they seem to avoid showing us it and the UI has clearly been changed up. A shame if it's gone, but if it does return, I wonder if they'll keep it colorful like colored buttons like the Super Famicom, or purple like the Super Nintendo buttons. I feel like they're going to standardize whatever the look is across all releases if it is here at all. And beyond just a new UI, we do have new elements to the combat as well. It's not entirely understood yet, but this image seems to explain what we know fairly well so far. So I'm just going to read it. Chain increases with consecutive successfully timed hits. So Mario RPG is known for having timed attacks and timed hits, so you can now chain up combos with that. You get these like buffs for that. Percent gauge seems to increase when you do anything. So that circular icon there, that's a percentage, that goes up pretty much whenever you do anything, it seems like. According to Nintendo, successful chains trigger buffs. The way they trigger in the trailer is somewhat inconsistent, however, so more details are needed. However, buff strength seems to be tied to the percentage meter. At 30% and below, you get status up small, but at 60% and higher, you get status up medium. What happens when that percentage meter hits 100 is not known, but I have a guess at that we'll talk about in a second. There is a new visual indicator telling you when to input for a timed hit. This indicator is present for both physical and special attacks, as well as defense. When you defend, they actually make this kind of shield barrier thing. You can see it in that top image. The timed hits exclamation mark indicator will eventually disappear if you continuously land timed hits. There is a new mechanic to timed hits. Performing a timed hit perfectly when executing a normal attack will give the attack an area of effect property. That's where you hit the whole group of enemies next to each other. It is not currently known if the perfect timed hit mechanic will apply to special attacks or defense. Magic attacks have a notice letting you know you can't block them. It pops up in the right-hand corner. There is now a visual indicator of how many super/ultra jumps you have performed, so you don't have to mentally keep track of aiming for 100. Performing 100 super jumps in a row unlocks something special in the game for those of you who don't know, so not having to count it in your head now is going to be a lot easier to get that. So yeah, some of this might make the game easier, particularly the visual cues and the area of effect damage to multiple enemies at once. And there's some aspects of this that aren't entirely understood yet. Perhaps before the game's out, we could get another trailer explaining the combat system in depth. I do want to speculate about that percentage meter real quick though, as the trailer had something really interesting in it. So this part of the trailer shows what looks like attack cutscenes for the different characters. So I'm guessing when that meter fills to 100, some kind of super attack unlocks that has some kind of cinematic moment attached to it that can be performed. These might even be specific not only to which character uses them, but who your party consists of. If these cinematics are actually from some kind of super attack, notice they focus on one character, but have others in the shot as well. Here's Geno and Mallow on some rainbows, but freeze framing shows there's actually 3 rainbows. This is probably some Geno attack involving Mario and Mallow riding the other 2 rainbows. It might end with this shot of Geno doing like this double blast. Peach, where she's front and center, and she's pulled out her umbrella. Bowser has his Koopa clown car here with Mario and Mallow along for the ride. This shot of Mallow filling with electricity, if you look really closely, you can see Mario's glove and Peach's dress in the corners. If these are special attacks tied to specific team combinations, that could add a real awesome layer of fun here. Locking specials behind certain teams will make picking your characters, your battle team, really fun. Reminds me a lot of Chrono Trigger, to be honest. While that sounds like there'd be a lot of specific attacks for them to animate for every possible combination of characters and who's using the attack, keep in mind in the original, and I suspect here as well, Mario always has to be in your party. So that would limit down the overall number of combinations, making creating this new element to combat much more manageable. They wouldn't have to make an absurd amount of these character-specific triple attacks. They just have to make a handful of them. I really do think this is what's going on here, and I'm very excited to see all the possible party team-up attacks, if that is indeed what these scenes are, but I'm placing my bets on it. Now, some of the combat information from this image was gathered off of this Japanese website for the game. Just a Google Translate job, but check it out, Geno spelled with an I. Can you imagine PapaGenos? Anyway, there's some interesting images of things we didn't see in the trailer here. A few enemies we didn't see, and an image of the Hammer Bros boss battle is on here. However, the really interesting thing is at the bottom of the page. It says, Nintendo Switch Super Mario RPG will be released on Friday, November 17th. We will continue to introduce elements that can be enjoyed in addition to the original experience, as it is. So please look forward to the follow-up report. Now, again, just a Google Translate job, but we will continue to introduce elements that can be enjoyed in addition to the original experience implies they're adding things not in the original game, some of which we've seen already with the combat. And please look forward to the follow-up report implies we will get more information about the game between now and its release. Not that I think anyone was doubting that. I'm really hopeful that if there is a September Direct this year like there usually is, we'll get a big showcase for Mario RPG there. So while I love that this game is a remake of the original, and that they are being mostly faithful to the original game, I do welcome additional content. Honestly, the game is fairly short by today's standards. It certainly could use some tweaking and polish. The platforming controls, for example, always felt overly stiff. They could definitely fix that quite a bit. And I am all for adding additional content to this game. I saw some people online getting excited by this pathway, thinking that it was a new area of the game. It was just a mistake though, that path has always been there. It was just far less detailed before. It now looks like stairs leading down rather than a little square area floating into a blue void. Also, this shot is of Marymore. I think people were assuming it might have been Peach's Castle, because they did change the roof color of Peach's Castle to blue in the remake, likely to fit with the roof color on the game's original overworld map, which was not consistent between the two screens. Actually, they were real careful not to show us the highly iconic overworld map in the trailer, which has me wondering if there really are additional areas to explore this time around. We see this shot of what looks like a desert area. It could be Land's End, which has sand and stuff, but this seems far more like a big traditional open desert, so I don't know. Artistic interpretation, or is it a new place? Could we travel to Sarasa Land for a Daisy cameo? She's gotten attention with Super Mario Wonder recently. Probably wishful thinking, but just a thought. I talked about these, which I think are some sort of specific team attacks, but if these aren't that and they're just cutscenes from in the game, some of these aren't from any particular moments in the old game, so they'd have to be something new. Though again, my guess remains team-specific super attacks. I mentioned earlier how they removed the Western subtitle, Legend of the Seven Stars, likely just so that there's consistency across releases, but it could also potentially mean that they have added more parts of the game and we could find an 8th or 9th star or something. So they wanted to avoid saying that there's 7 stars in the game, because maybe there's an extra one. Number of stars aside, they could add some post-game content. The Culex fight is more difficult than the final boss Smithy, so that was sort of a post-game fight, but they could expand on that concept. Who's to say they couldn't add an extra area or a bit more story or something at the end? Maybe add Star Road as an extra part of the map that you travel to after you rebuild it to help Geno out with some extra story conflict at the end. There's tons of cut content from the original and lots of unused concept art. Like I said before, we've seen concept art posted online the last few years. Maybe digging through all that stuff has given the developers some ideas for some new enemies or new post-game bosses or something. One thing I'd love for them to update and add this time is the outfits actually changing the look of the characters. The original game guide had art for all of the outfits and weapons, but in-game the characters' sprites look the same no matter what they're wearing. Would be incredible to finally see Geno in that cool flame cape. Smash Bros alt costumes or what? They could also add other Mario characters to this game if they wanted to. as like cameos or otherwise. For example, it's been a long-running fan theory that the higher authority that sent Geno to help with the whole Star Road conflict might have been Rosalina. While I don't expect this to be confirmed, it would be cool if they decided to make this fan theory canon. I will say the higher authority thing always had a minor religious implication to it, which Nintendo might want to avoid these days. And a nice way to do that could be to name the authority. Who's that higher authority? It's Rosalina. Canonize this fan theory. It'd be pretty cool. Booster, of course, looks very Wario-like. A lot of people question if he is Wario when they first play the game, so it might be neat to add a nod to Wario somewhere in the Booster plot. Maybe a portrait of Wario or Waluigi in Booster Tower, implying a family relationship connection there. Or have Wario and Waluigi attend Booster's wedding in Marrymore. I'd welcome cameos like that. The biggest omission from the cast is, and always has been, Luigi. He was relegated to the instruction booklet in the original Mario RPG, and only appears in the actual game itself, leading the end credits parade. Prime opportunity to expand Luigi's role with additional content here. Have him as a post or endgame party member, a secret party member. Or at least give him something to do somewhere in the game. Put him somewhere in the game tied to some new additional content. If you have additional content, tie Luigi into it. It just makes too much sense. I believe this is an early beta screenshot which shows Luigi was at one time a bigger part of the game. Again, prime opportunity to bring him back in some way. And finally, not in the game itself, but something I'd love to see happen, this game could lead to a Geno amiibo. Something I've wanted almost as badly as getting Geno in Smash Bros. Is getting an official figure of Geno. I mean, he's a toy come to life in the game. I think the toys to life thing going on with amiibo fits him pretty darn well. A Geno Malo 2-pack amiibo would sell like crazy. I'd personally buy many, many copies of that. Make it happen, Nintendo. It's just too good of an opportunity to pass up. Alright, well, plenty more to speculate about this game for the next few months, and I'll continue to cover it as we get more information. I plan to make a separate, likely shorter video focused on what all this could mean for the future of Geno and the future of the Mario RPG series specifically. Could this lead to a sequel? Could this lead to Geno in Smash Bros? Could Geno and Malo end up in other Mario games, etc.? I got a lot to say on all that stuff, but figured I'd save it for next time as this video's gotten long enough. I will just say, if you haven't played Mario RPG, but find it interesting enough to make it to the end of this video, I implore you to please go buy the game and give it a try. It's an amazing game, you won't be disappointed. Especially if you already like other Mario role-playing games like the Paper Mario series and the Mario & Luigi series. This is the one that started it all and is among the best entries in the Mario role-playing game genre. And for those who already love Mario RPG and want this series to continue, or to have Geno and Malo show up in other Nintendo games to get Geno and Smash, if you're interested in a future where these characters in this iteration of the Mario universe continue, please let's all go let Nintendo know with our wallets and buy this game when it comes out. Go pre-order it if you can. It's eligible for the Switch voucher, so go ahead and take advantage of that deal if you are going to go digital with the game. The very existence of this game shows Nintendo is listening to us, so let's make sure they hear what we want. Alright guys, still can't believe I now live in a world where Geno is back. He is once again a relevant Nintendo character with an upcoming game. That's absolutely crazy to me. Look forward to my next video on the future for Geno, Malo, and the Mario RPG series. Again, I'm going to do a deep dive on that as its own separate video. And if you have any thoughts or comments about any of the stuff I talked about in this video, feel free to leave them below. Geno is back.
Remember to like the video, leave a comment in the section below, and subscribe to PapaGenos!
Twitter, Patreon, Discord, Twitch.